So first we cleared the edge along the sidewalk, basically where the stones were going to go. Cleared all the tall grasses, any clump grasses, anything like that. Was raked towards the middle. And then over the top of what was there, we poured about 2 to 3 inches of manure. And that was leveled out. And then on top of that is a layer of, I believe, alfalfa, green straw, green hay. And then on top of that are 2 to 3 layers of unwaxed cardboard, and then wood chips are on top. That was all hosed down with each layer that we put down. So we put down the manure and laid alfalfa and then hosed it down and then layered each layer of cardboard with a hosing in between.
This is pretty good stuff here because it isn't just like all trunk wood. There's bark in here, and there's maybe even some needles and leaves possibly, but there's what I call and twigs. There's fines. It isn't just straight coarse. The more trunk wood it is, the higher carbon ratio. Barks, twigs, leaves, needles, all that stuff is a much higher mineral and nitrogen content. So this is good. This is good stuff. And if it's aged for a couple of years, even better. It's a lot longer to break down sawdust because that's solid trunk wood. It wants to mat together. Water wants to run off of it. It wants to sort of cake up and not let anything through. So I don't like sawdust much. It can be used, but it's a low priority thing for me to use. Start kind of turning yellow and not growing very well. Not enough nitrogen. Make, a manure tea or a comfrey teas, various kinds of teas that are really rich and yummy, or fish fertilizer dissolved in water, and just pour some of that at the base of the plants and give some liquid nitrogen to it to just really give it a boost. So you can add, and so maybe that's it with the sawdust. It takes a lot more nitrogen to balance that. And when I till soil, I actually spread chips on the soil in a light application before I till to add texture, and you don't want too much of that. You wouldn't want to do that with sawdust, but you could till some of this into the ground, but you definitely wouldn't do it with fresh sawdust. Leaving the sod in there has the benefit that all that topsoil and everything stays right there instead of like trying to take it off. You plant it usually, not always, but I like to plant it the day that I make it. So it's ready to plant, we're ready to go. And here's my technique. I'm going to put in, I usually put in things like broccoli, tomatoes if it's the right time of year, herbs, seedlings. So I'll poke a hole, move my bar around. So now I have a hole that goes through all the layers into the soil down there. Actually, I'm not trying to make extra holes. Then I have a planting, I call it a planting pocket. And then you get some soil, have a good topsoil worked in there, and then you have to be able to. Here we go. Here's my transplant. I have to get my transplant in there, and then pack it in with some dirt, and then water it in. Now, what's going to happen? Because this is usually a seedling with a little, came out of a 4-inch pot or a 2-inch pot. Sometimes it's a bit of work to get it to scrunch into the hole, but when I water it in, it helps consolidate the soil around the root systems, make good contact. As it starts growing, the roots are down below, and maybe they're not even in the soil necessarily. Usually, they're usually perched a little above it. But as it starts growing, because you're watering it, its roots go boom down into the ground. And as this system starts decomposing, its roots go into all the layers, and eventually it'll even be rooting into this layer later in the season. But it occupies the space, and then, of course, I can then, depending on my spacing, when I'm putting in, I can put another one in here or here, at the right spacing. The less holes, of course, the better, because every time you have a hole, if you've got quackgrass or other weeds under there, some of them will tend to come up through that hole too, and so you'll have to do a little hand weeding around. You will start getting some quackgrass coming through if there's quackgrass or long-lived things like Canada thistle, but then you can just pull it out and it just comes out really easy with the root. So it's real easy to weed a sheet mulch. But you should stay on that weeding. You want to, if you get some weeds through it, get on it, and so that you keep it clean, so that you don't have that reinfestation, so to speak.
Do you also have to water at the base of the seedling? Because I assume that with all those layers of cardboard, you're not going to have real good infiltration of water.
Right. So when this ground is fully moisturized from the winter rains, etc., and snow melt, and we watered the dry stuff as we made it. If you did this in the middle of the summer or later in the spring and the soil's drying out, and you did this, and then it's all dry under there, so you have to put a sprinkler on here and wet the ground really thoroughly, the whole soil block, before you do your hugelkultur, because it's going to be hard to get water through the cardboard for the first couple of months or a month or two till it starts dissolving. But when you do water this, the water is going to find those holes, so the water is going to preferentially go down by your seedlings. So I've done this quite a few times, and I've always had it work really good with me. Sometimes if I have a giant expanse of lawn like the University of Montana, and I want to take over, I can have a circular hugelkultur, and around the edges I plant squash hills. I can actually make a hole instead of putting a transplant in. I can put in squash transplants or squash seeds. They germinate and they'll run out there 10-15 feet, so I have this bed that's only this big around, but it'll make a garden that goes a lot further. The next year the grass will start invading on the edges, so I just mulch another ring around it and then another ring, so I'm expanding over time going outward from my central area. After 2 years of sheep, if you have a nice thick, this is relatively good thick layer of chips. In 2 years that'll be largely eaten up, and then you can come out here with a rototiller or a shovel and turn this area in here into your beds for carrots and beets and stuff, because now it's tillable. You've got rid of the weeds and the grasses, and then you're expanding that way, and in between, so in other words, you can have a nice tribal garden in the wake of the sheet mulch. So, or you could just re-chip it.
Will the cardboard be gone in 2 years?
The cardboard will be gone in just months.
Oh.
You won't. It'll last maybe the whole first year that you can see it, depending how much time you water it and stuff.
Yeah.
But usually within the year or less, it's indistinguishable. It dissolves, gets eaten up. There's a lot of gaps in there. We didn't, especially in the lower layers, but it's really going to be really humid in there over time, especially next year. And so the roots from the lettuce or the broccoli or whatever is in here is going to zoom down there. And if there's a bit of an air pocket, the root just goes. It's just a nice humid air gas-filled chamber. It just zips right on down through it and keeps on growing, so it won't be a root barrier.
And do you ever have to deal with a lot of erosion on these? I can see
if you made it really, it's amazing that seps. This is really rounded and not, but seps are that tall with a steep slope, and so what he does, I don't know if you notice he actually puts dead branches on it and pins them into it to help hold it up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then after the roots are all in there, then it helps hold it together. But the first year it does want to slump and slough. So he's actually having to do special measures to avoid that.
Okay.
But something like this, yes, if you have a good lot of irrigation going and it's really long, after a while you start getting runnels down here. It will erode a little bit.
So, tell me what you think about this. I was going to actually plant a wind barrier hedge on here and view. So, like perennial shrubby stuff with the long-term idea of not having to maintain it too much with water, but just getting it going. Versus vegetables.
Well, this took a lot of material to make, and manures and the woody debris, and so it's valuable. This is and time. So this is got a lot of investment here. So you want a good yield for your investment, a good return on your investment.
On that side?
Berries could be. You could do berries, and Sepp's hugelkultur, he's got trees in it, and berries and vegetables and herbs, everything all mixed in. If I was going to put shrubs in, it's hard to, oh, I knew what I was thinking of that. It's going to be hard to get a shrub root system dug in there, you know. Maybe if you have a potted plant or something really small, but you can't take like a big root ball and dig a hole in there and bury it, because it's shallow till you hit all the wood.
How about a well mulched row along here, and then slowly filling that in, but capitalizing on that hole for a year or two?
I tend to consider hugelkulturs in zone 1, zone 2 as vegetable production or herb production or some kind of high value production, rather than just throwing some shrubs on it. Not that you can't do it.
They're going to be edible.
Right, if they have a lot of berries on, but they're going to be small the first years.
Yeah.
So you might you get a lot of vegetables in between them the first years, and then it gradually goes into the berry phase. So perennial herbs isn't much work either.
Yeah.
Comparatively, and you can do those with little transplants.